the fact that Dave became a danger because he became creative. He started to not be a robot anymore. Now, this is where we get into something else to do with the brain. Becky Edwards, back in the 1980s, produced a book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. It sold millions of copies. It taught lots of people who didn't know how to draw really well. And it's a fantastic book. I mean, it's really great, you know. And she brought the left and right brain thing down to very simplistic levels, which kind of became a meme and a kind of a stereotype that the left brain is always analytical, methodological, you know, obsessed with systems, processes, rules, dogma, male, you know, very, you want to put that into it. The right side of the brain is where the dreamer, imagination, where the artist, the poet, feminine side resides. That's a very simplistic understanding because of the fMRI machine. It shows that basically both sides of the brain are capable of the same functions. However, this is interesting, very interesting. The left side of the brain seems to be, in Western people only, incredibly narcissistic and bullying. It bullies the right brain. It's always putting it down. And how they know this is there's a 4% of the fibers that connect the two hemispheres of the brain across the central membrane. They thought that the purpose of those fibers was for the human brain to communicate between the two hemispheres to do brain lateralization. Actually, it was more sinister than that. It's actually showed up on the MRI machine. When the right brain starts having an idea, the left brain says, shut up. Literally, it sends electrical signals, stop. I'm the boss here. I'm the smart one. I'm the one who knows all about science. I'm the one who knows all about processes. I'm the one who knows all about methodology. You're just a flighty dreamer, right brain. And literally, and you can see it as clear as anything. You can actually see the fibers actually lighting up on the fMRI and shutting it off. And so this is the latest understanding on it, that the left brain has become, through a sort of an evolutionary process, but it's a little bit more intense than that, has become the bully of the mind. It has become the boss. You do what as I say. You do exactly what I say. And the right brain has been diminished. Why? Education. Our education system is geared towards our left brain being the dominant hemisphere of our brain. The purpose for that is, that's why you learn compound fractions, functions, logarithms, times tables. That's why soldiers are told to march. That's why you have structures. And the left brain, because it works so well, there's a sense of reward. There may be an epigenetic aspect to it as well. Epigenetics are literally, you're switching on gene sequences due to thoughts. You know, you can't just say, I'm cured like that of a disease, but it has been shown that epigenetics will trigger dormant gene sequences to become active. The left brain in the West has become absolutely so powerful, except among artists. It's like people who haven't had formal education, and especially with people from indigenous backgrounds. And this is why I explain why they always tried to spread civilization. They weren't spreading civilization, they were spreading left brain domination. And that's why, like, the place in Ireland I live, there's some very remote mountains there. And the people who lived in those mountains back in the 1800s were incredibly poor. These were the ones who would have all died in famines and stuff like that. They had nothing. Their lifestyle hadn't changed between the Middle Ages and the 1800s. And yeah, there's ruins of schools that were built by the government. They wouldn't send them food, they sent them education. By the government, there were schools in the most remote mountain valleys. So the kids got nothing, but they were forced to go to school. They were forced to stop speaking their own native language. They were forced to adopt to matrices, rules, formats, timetables, tests, in order to remove the savage, remove the native, kill it off, destroy it. put the fire out in the smithy in their soul, as James Joyce put it out. So instead of them becoming the masters and the mavens of their own destiny, what they become is followers. They become a flock. This has been going on for a long time. They discovered way back that if human beings are subject to certain rituals and formats, they become much more easier to control. Babylonians knew all about this. They actually changed people's consciousness around the time of the harvest. Babylonians, because they were phenomenal engineers, they were very good at irrigation. So they were able to build amazing agricultural networks, but when you control the food, what else do you control? So what happens then? People become fearful of the food supply running out. Fear, where a hunter-gatherer society, previous the guy would have said, well, my wife and kids are hungry, I'm going to shoot some rabbits, I'm going to go up to the hill and get some chestnuts. That's all gone now. You wait until the harvest is produced and then you will buy the grain. And then that introduces what? Well, inflation. And what happens then? Suppose you two give me a hard time and I'm the boss. Well, no food for you. That'll teach you, right? You know what I mean? And then you'll say, you look at your wife and kids and you're saying they're starving. Kind of thing. And then they would actually encourage marriages for that reason, you know that. So there would actually be, you'd be responsible for someone more than yourself or your friends. You actually had a legal mandate to protect people. And so, then you see your kids getting hungry and it's about what he says. You do it for your kids because you love them, you do it for your wife because you love her. And so they control you. And that was the beginning. They didn't have science and they didn't have psychology back then, but they knew, like a psychopath, that certain triggers change a person's behaviour. It's almost like they learn, it's like training a horse or training an animal. They would train the people and they realised that the people become fearful, develop anxieties, and then the benevolent ruler would give them an extra bit of corn or something like that, and they would say, isn't he a great man, isn't he a great leader? But the thing was, they don't realise they were prisoners to begin with, because they were put into the agricultural system. Where before their ancestors were hunter-gatherers or, that kind of thing. They lived, and actually, more in touch with nature like indigenous people were. But also at the same time, it's been shown now that actual standards of living collapsed when agricultural system came in. People who lived in a hunter-gatherer society had less diseases. Things like rickets were unheard of. There was less war, believe it or not. There's no weapons that were found in these societies. There was things like spears for catching fish, rabbits, that was found, but no war weapons because there was no land to control. And then the land itself, where you would have had an open meadow, you would have enclosures. So then nature's now being quantified. You understand? The left brain thing is now moving out of the human being and moving into the natural world. The enclosures acts that they've had all over these islands starting in the 1100s was to basically take the land more and more away from the people and give it to the landlords, and anyone who controlled the land. And again, you got hedgerows, agricultural lines. Nature is not free-flowing. This has tremendous impact on the subconscious of human beings, because we start to think that that's what nature is and that's what we are. We become robotic. Now, that doesn't work with everybody, okay? And that works fantastic if every single human being in the world was a robot, or was a carbon copy or a clone. Well, they'd love to do that, by the way. They'd absolutely love that. We all have the same thoughts. But because we're not actually a product of our genetics, I'm talking about the deepest part of our personality. Of course we're a product of our genetics, because the way we look and our health and so on. But the lower parts of our subconscious is not. It comes from somewhere else. Like the rest of our consciousness, it comes from somewhere else. We are individuals. We're different. And this has been driving governments mad for millennia. And the ones who were the most dangerous of all were the artists. And there was a whole thing was creating an idea of what sanity is and what insanity is. You see, we think that like sanity and insanity are very rigid concepts, but they're not really. They're more culturally imposed concepts than anything else. In 1984, George Orwell, when Winston Smith went into room 101, O'Brien, who we thought was the resistance contact leader, was actually a shill, who had him, I wasn't pointing at you for that reason. It actually had
He exposes it.
Why you pointing?
you know what I'm saying? You see, the message of 1984 is that Winston Smith taught that his salvation was to look for an underground, but the underground was ran by the Big Brother. So, but however, Orwell showed how Winston Smith really became free. At the beginning of the book, when he gets out the journal, you're not supposed to have a journal or a pen. He bought it off the proletariat, and he wrote, in terror, he writes in the first line, down with Big Brother. Because he knows he'd be vaporized for that. And then he writes the second line, down with Big Brother. And eventually, as he keeps writing down with Big Brother, he's losing his fear of Big Brother. And then before he knows it, he's completed the whole page. He doesn't remember doing the ones in between. He had a shift in consciousness by just writing down with Big Brother. And he was already free from that moment on. And that was the message of that book, that you didn't have to join the resistance. That you didn't have to, wait for spies or in the network. As soon as you were free up here, that was it. You were free. The freedom was in here. It wasn't because of some flag, some banner, some constitution, some manifesto. Winston Smith was free from the moment he wrote down with Big Brother. And when he's in room 101 after he's been betrayed by O'Brien, O'Brien says to him, Winston, you're here because you chose to be a lunatic. And a lunatic in Oceania was someone who could think for themselves. See what I'm saying? Insanity is totally culturally, not totally, but it's culturally can be fluctuated. Just like morality, another thing they've given us, same idea. Same idea with religion and the ideas of good and bad. Before the creation of the one God, monotheism, there was polytheism, where there were gods for everything. There was goddesses for the trees, gods for the rivers, gods for the mountains, blah blah blah. Then in the 6th century BC, a Persian prophet called Zoroaster created the idea of dualism, where there was good and evil, right? And then good was here. I say this is what's good, and this is what's evil. And all I have to do is change the parameters between what's good and evil, and suddenly you create people that you can kill, imprison, and this works the same way with sanity. We have this very rigid notice of what sanity is, and sanity is based on a left-brain, formulaic understanding of what a human being is, a machine that's obsessed with processes and uniquely guided towards the functionality of a society. And if they do not work towards the functionality of the society, which I believe now, in fact I know for a fact, is psychopathic, then they're considered insane. And this is where the thing of mental illness comes in. A person who, from my experience, I've never suffered from it, but I've had friends who did, and I've observed it. And I'm working with someone at the moment writing a book about this. She is a mental health professional who got sick of giving people Prozac and Xanax, and having them go through the traditional thing, and they're only getting worse. And she said the same thing that I've said, the same thing that the indigenous culture said. And what happens is people have an expansion of their awareness through this 5 sense reality. They see things bigger. They see things in a more, a different way. The bandwidth is expanded, the frequency is expanded. However, because of their education system and the left brain dominated ideas of what being sane is, they cannot handle this explosion of awareness. And so their field of vision goes from what they came out of college and university. From that, the trigger could be numerous things, to that. And because they do not have the tools inside themselves to deal with this expansion of their consciousness and awareness, they go into psychic crash. And this is the problem. Instead of when people have this awakening, I don't like the word awakening, but this expansion of their cognitive functioning, we instantly stigmatize them as being mentally ill. The ones who are most successful in dealing with that are the ones who turn that into creativity. They're able to paint, draw, write, and deal with this fluctuation. we have this situation in modern psychiatry where they say, well, depression is a terrible thing, and depression can be a terrible thing for many people. But however, how many works of art have been created by depression, and the ability to try and get from the lowest to the highest, the people that dig themselves out of the darkness, to come out from the dark night of the soul. Why do they call it blues music? You know, African Americans, totally at the mercy of a bigoted culture in the South. Well, when they had nothing else, they had their music and their culture and their art, and that was the blues. And they, that would probably create the most powerful cultural thing probably since the Enlightenment that's dominated the world, and that was brought about for human suffering. Now, I'm not saying we should make everyone suffer, not get great art, but it just shows you how powerful this thing is. Human beings are remarkable, and that need to pull out from, using art to pull out from the consciousness, from the depths of negative consciousness or wounded consciousness, has played such an enormous part in what we call culture. It really has. You really start to look at it, you know what I mean? How many people that go on X Factor or American Idol will ever produce a work of art that will actually affect your soul? You understand? They won't, because they're picked deliberately, because they don't have, because they're to project a soulless idea. This is also why youth cultures are co-opted. How much time do you have for this video?
Just about 10 minutes.
5 minutes, right? So, because I don't want to go into a big thing, but you see, the idea then is like, okay, we have a situation now. A friend of mine, Kevin Miller, he made a film called Generation RX. Brilliant film. You get the DVD. And he talks about the medication of children in America. And you have all these kids on, these kids may be hyperactive, maybe moody, and they're immediately putting them on Ritalin and other psychotropic meds, and the kids are like literally zombies. It's not the kids' fault, but their cognitive process are switched off, because a lot of these medications affect the electrical functioning of the brain. So you're like going back to first gear. So I spoke to him recently about this, and I said, well, is this a cultural time bomb? Will America never produce another Duke Ellington? Will America never produce another Jack Kerouac, another William S. Burroughs, another Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix? And he said, you know what, I think you're right. They're robbing them, because they won't have that full range of cognitive, experience from the lowest to the highest. And they're really they're creating planet mush. They're putting us into planet mush, because planet mush is great for business, and that's what psychopaths really want to do in business. They want to make more money, and they want to destroy all cultures that are, to create what they may call it multiculturalism. What they really want is blandoculturalism, because they can sell the same products to everybody. That's what that's about. That's what they really want. They talk about diversity, but what they really want is everybody being the same as what we should say they're like. And so that became such a profound thing in me, because you look at the history of art. You look at, I remember seeing Stephen Fry saying once that he was, he's a very clever, talented guy, funny guy. He suffers from very bad depression and what they call bipolar. I don't actually believe in a lot of these conditions, not in the technical sense. And he said that if he was given the choice, so he did a documentary about it. He was given the choice to have his bipolar, his extreme flows from lows to highs taken away from him, so he would just be neutral all the time. He said he wouldn't do it. And neither would many of the people that were on that program who were interviewed. Some of them had extreme fluctuations of behaviour, happiness, sadness, and it caused them no end of problems in their lives. But they still said, I would not want to experience this, because digging out of the depths and pulling yourself up was where the magic in their lives was always created. That's happened to me. I've seen that happen to lots of people. That digging out, it's so symbolic that we talk about coming from the lowest to the highest, but what we're really coming from is from the subconscious. The higher poles of cognitive functioning exist in this world. So you pull it up from the psyche, You pull it up from inside yourselves. This is why when you hear a lot of conspiracy theorists saying, well, they're going to destroy us with brain chips and stuff. Well, maybe they could, but you have to remember, it doesn't begin in there. It just ends in there. The soul down below, is still capable of being, or the psyche of it bypassing that. And you can see that. I often think that movie, the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that's a very profound scene. You have Mac Murphy, played by Jack Nicholson, who plays the sort of like wild character. He's a bit of a Jack the Lad, and he's been sectioned. But what he really represents is he's the return of the native, of the savage within Western American society. Because he looks around at all these fellas and he realizes they're all fucked up because they can't fit into the system. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just that they can't make themselves into the jigsaw piece to fit into the system. So they'd rather be considered loonies, mad, stigmatized and sectioned than to actually try and change something. And there's one pivotal scene where he goes around the woman, when you shouldn't be in here, there's nothing wrong with you, and this kind of thing. And they don't want to hear it. No, I'm not well. The doctor says I'm not well. And that's because he was escaping from the system that had actually brought them to destruction. And that's what the chief, the Indian, represented. The Indian represented that scene. And at the horrible scene at the end where Mark Murphy gets a lobotomy, the chief kills him and runs away to the sunset. What that was like, the native tradition hasn't been destroyed, and when is the Western man going to follow us back? And that's beautiful stuff when you think about it. But it's also the same thing as saying the bureaucrat is dead. When is the artist going to come back? The politician is finished. When is the dreamer going to come back? And the pathological system that we're under is destroying people's lives, putting them into units and boxes. Who's going to lead them out of that? And I believe what they call the insane people and the artists are the way out of that. And just like you said in Orwell's 1984, you chose to be a lunatic. And as this world becomes more and more insane, maybe choosing to be a lunatic would be actually a better path to follow than being a good citizen. So we want to take a break now? Okay, we'll come back. Thank you.